Well, the American dream seems to be at risk. Fewer people are able to afford homes, new cars, or even vacations. People's money isn't going as far as it once did, and wealth is accumulating into the hands of a few Wall Street and big tech billionaires. On top of this, we have global elites at the WEF telling us that soon we will own nothing. But don't worry, you will be happy. With us now is Carol Roth. She is a recovering investment banker and author of the new book, You Will Own Nothing, Your War with the New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back. Carol, welcome to the show.
Kim, so great to be with you.
So, one thing you mentioned is that back in the day, and maybe we could even argue it's still somewhat going on, but countries would go and conquer other countries in order to gain wealth. That was how the elites did it. They would show up on the shores and they would try to suck out resources from people that were weaker and less equipped to fight back than them. But now it's shifted. And instead of showing up on some foreigner's shore, they're coming after us. Is that what's happening?
It really does feel like that. And I've been calling it World War F, sort of a financial world war where you are effed, if you can say that. And and the reality is that we have seen sort of this wholesale transfer of wealth from Main Street to Wall Street. We've seen it happen with the debasement of the currency. We've seen it happen by monetary policy that's really given a leg up to those who are wealthy and well connected and has crushed the middle class. You started the segment talking about something like home ownership.
Yeah.
That is the symbol of the American dream. When you think about that, what do you picture? You picture the house with the picket fence in front of it. And there's actually a good reason, in my opinion. The house is typically the largest asset on household balance sheets across the United States. So the way that households get wealthy is through this home ownership over long periods of time. What's happened in recent years is we've seen things like after the Great Recession financial crisis, where the big banks were bailed out and almost 6 million people lost their homes to short sales or foreclosures. That there was really this differential between not only the way they were treated but what happened after. The Fed policy after that, the suppression of interest rates, this printing of money, it gave just an enormous amount of incredibly cheap capital to Wall Street, and they drove up the asset prices of everything. So if you had an asset, that was great for you. You're wealthy. That inflated. If you were just trying to get by and earn a little bit money on your savings, like you that wasn't working out so well for you. But what happened is those investors, after they drove up the prices of all the assets, then they said, well, what else can we do here? And they said, oh, single family homes. Before 2010, there was no meaningful institutional capital in the single family home market. Now, but end of 2022, about one in every five homes was purchased by a corporate investor. So that is a wholesale transfer of wealth. And what they're doing, obviously, they're not trying to make it better so that you can buy it and accumulate wealth. They're trying to rent you the American dream so that you, middle class person, don't no longer have this wealth creation opportunity. And that money is going directly to Wall Street.
Yeah, and it used to be even just in my dad's generation. That's just one generation ago, where people would buy homes at 21 years old. Now
Yeah,
if a
right.
21-year-old bought a house today, it's like, wow, that's really impressive. And unless you're living in a part of the country where there's just few areas of the country where you might be able to do that. But otherwise, it is just completely unaffordable, especially the larger the city you get into. It seems to be really impossible. What do you think the
Well,
solution? Let's start with the housing issue. What do you think the solution is to that? Because you're right, that is the greatest asset. That's the greatest symbol of the American dream is that home ownership. Fewer people are wanting to do it. They're seeing that it's unaffordable. Either the mortgage itself is too high, the interest rates are going up. Now we're seeing, like in Florida, insurance companies bailing out of the state, making home ownership unaffordable because they can't afford to, lose their investment to a hurricane. So what do you think the solution is to that?
So I think there's two pieces of it. So let's talk about the home affordability part, and then let's also talk about young people and their ability to purchase a home, because there's sort of two different sets of solutions. On the home affordability front, we need to have more supply in the market. And the
Yeah.
reality is that regulation at the state and local level, as well as some of the federal regulations that add about almost $100,000 to the average price of a new home need to be restructured. I mean, not to say we should have no regulations, because obviously, you want your electrical work to not create fires in homes. That's
Right.
a good thing. But we don't need $100,000 worth of those regulations. I'm pretty sure we could pare that back, especially since they've grown very substantially over just the past few years. So we need to get, more home supply into the market. We need some of these NIMBY laws and the zoning laws to go away. But we also need to fix the labor market, because one of the reasons why you can't get homes built is because we can't find laborers who are able to come in and to do these things. So all the central planning that we've seen has really created those issues. I do think individuals and housing associations can also fight back in terms of what you're doing vis-a-vis these corporate owners. I've talked to several people recently who said, hey, when I sold my house, there were several bidders on it, and the highest one was that corporate bidder. They've got all cash. They don't need to, apply for a mortgage. They don't need to even walk the property because they're not going to live in. There isn't that emotional tie. I know, I want you to get the most you can for your home, but is it worth that extra couple $1,000s to turn that over to a corporate buyer who may take that out of the market and out of supply forever? So that's just a little thing you can do. Housing associations have also been pushing back by requiring approvals and the like in order for a renter or a corporate buyer to come in. And I think it makes a lot of sense because as we talk about other components of the book and things like social credit, even imagine if you don't own your home and all of a sudden you say the wrong thing on social media. You can be dragged off social media right now, your bank account. You don't want to have that happening with your home too. So
Yeah.
that's sort of one set of solutions. I think the other piece that we should talk about, Kim, for young people, is that part of the reason is housing affordability, but part of it is that their balance sheets have been wrecked. And their balance sheets have been wrecked by predatory government lending. Once the
Hmm.
government took over college lending, they basically enabled a wholesale wealth transfer from Main Street, or from these young kids to colleges and the college administrators. So if you have taken out 5 or 6 figures of debt for some sort of a degree that doesn't pay itself back, now how are you even going to think about investing in anything, let alone a house, when you're saddled with all this debt?
Yeah, college loans definitely is a big topic, and there's obviously there's a big debate about that. There's a lot of people that definitely do not want to see any forgiveness of college loans. They say, well, you did it to yourself, so you have to pay that back. Even though we're talking about 18-year-olds who are, and also, so this is such a I have such a middle of the road view on this one a little. I do have college debt. I've paid off quite a bit of my college debt. I wouldn't mind seeing young people have their college debt completely forgiven. But you're right, the system is broken. And from my viewpoint, when the government started allowing these loans, the banks just were like, oh, awesome. I mean, if they're going to be government backed, then I have no reason not to give out loans to these young people, right? If you're the bank, it's like, oh, great.
Well, it's
There's
actually worse than that. The government nationalized most of the college lending business. So they actually took it away from the bank. The government is the one making those loans directly right now.
Yeah.
And that has
So
further
then
enabled the explosion of costs.
Right, because then universities are like, well, if the government is just going to pay for this, then we can just charge whatever the heck we want. And it's like
Exactly.
government contractors that are sucking the military industrial complex dry, charging $2,000 for a screw, right? And now you've got colleges essentially doing the same thing. It's like, look, you don't have new buildings. The books aren't any different. The knowledge hasn't changed. Why suddenly is the tuition 5 times the price than it was in our parents' generation? I mean, the tuition has skyrocketed. But, I hear the argument often from, on both sides. Obviously, I hear on the left people say we've just got to forgive college loans, but that doesn't correct okay, so you do it for one generation. What happens to the next generation? How long? You can't keep doing that. We have to correct the system. But then I hear people on the right say, well, college is a scam. You don't need college. And I'm thinking, wow, that is the fastest way to make our country dependent on China and India. You want to do that? You want we have their engineers, their doctors. Anybody who's educated is going to have to come from a foreign place if we really, truly hammer into the young people that they don't need a college education. That really puts us, I think, on back on not on good footing as a country in trying to compete against other nations. I don't think it's a good idea to minimize education. So education should be something we promote, something that we want everybody to have, but it should be at a much, much lower cost. But those college loans are just saddling students. So what would you say is the young people, and then they can't get houses because they're
Right.
$2,000 a month in college loan debt.
Right.
What do you think is the solution? I'm curious what your solution is to that one.
Yeah, so I think we have to get the government out of student lending. I mean, like you said, the cost of college has exploded 5 and 8 times, and I slightly dyslexic, so I always mix up which one is which, but times GDP and wages. So it's
Yeah.
grown like exponentially faster than both of those. And so, what we need to do is we need to get them out of college lending. We need to have an underwriting process just like you have for any other type of loan. So if you're going in and you're going to be an engineer and you're an A student and you have really big prospects, that's a higher value accreditation than if you're doing underwater basket weaving or whatever it is. And that should be
Sure.
priced appropriately along with their risk, as well as bringing back then the ability to have bankruptcy. That should be part of the process, just like it is for any other loan. And then have colleges have some
Mhm.
skin in the game, because if they're on the hook for this money as well, then they're not necessarily going to be doing the same kinds of expansion that they would be doing with the case of free money. Like you said, if we just forgive the money, if we say that's fine, I mean, that's just says to the colleges, oh, great, the government's just going to forgive it
Right.
anyway. That's
Right.
fantastic. And people who are already wealthy, I'm hearing this already, people who are super wealthy are taking out the loans going, well, just on the chance that it could be forgiven, like, why
Yeah.
wouldn't I? I'll either pay it off if they don't do it, but if they do, like, why wouldn't I want to take advantage of that? It's a sick moral hazard here.
The only problem is, and so and this is where the conversation gets nuanced and there's all these problems, is that if we say, okay, we're not going to have any more government-backed loans, then you really truly siphon all the wealth to the top just to those rich people who can afford it. Because one of the reasons why we have college loans, why the government offered it, was so that college could become affordable to more than just the elites in society, right? So that
How
the
did that
poor
work out,
people.
Kim?
Well, but I mean, but actually, but in some ways it's worked out quite well because you do have quite a few poor people and quite a few people in the lower middle class who are now able to get educated and raise up to another class level. So they're able to do that. But,
Sure. But they
I
should be able
understand that there's,
Yeah, they should be able
go
to do
ahead.
that through an underwriting process. The ones with merit, the ones who have good grades, who are pursuing good education, should still be able to get a loan. It should just be properly underwritten. And if it's properly underwritten, the overall cost of their degree should be, come down, and it should be commensurate with the value of that degree. So all of those things should align. I mean, I'm somebody who went to school. I'm a bit older than you, I think, and I came out in 1995 with $40,000 in college debt, which is the
Right.
kind of median amount that most people have today. And I paid that off in a year and a half, because even though neither of my parents went to college and we couldn't afford it, it made sense because I was going into investment banking and getting a finance degree from a top tier institution. If I was going into some sort of general studies at a mediocre school and had mediocre grades, then that loan amount should be right sized to that. And so that's what if there was a free market approach to this, that's what would
Hmm.
happen, instead of basically the government saying, we will give this carte blanche to anyone. It doesn't matter. We're going to take, there's going to be no differential here. And not saying to the colleges, why are you charging the same thing for that engineering degree as for one that, they're going to come out of college and make $50,000 a year.
Well, yeah. I mean, I understand your point, and I understand the free market. I'm not a free market person when it comes to college because I do believe that education is valuable and that we shouldn't just make it about making money. It's not about go get an education just so that you can make a bunch of cash. It should be we want to be an educated society because otherwise, I'm telling you, China's coming for you. You will lose. I'm half Asian. I'm telling you right now. We will not win this. The Asian viewpoint on education is very different than America's view on education. And because of that, we are in a losing position. And I cannot stress that enough to those that want to point at China as they're bad China, terrible. We got to watch out for China. Yes, you do. But it dumbing down society is definitely not the way to do it when they are educating their society. their society. To me, there's just value in education. There's value in allowing a young person the opportunity, even if they didn't do well in high school, they go off to college. We shouldn't say, well, because you didn't, pass your tests when you're 16 years old. What if you're a late bloomer? You should still be able to have
Sure.
those types of opportunities.
But
But
but I would say that there's a difference between education and accreditation, and college has become about accreditation. So if you want to change it to be about education, the entire system, that's a non-financial discussion. And college
right,
is valuable, but it's not valuable at any price. And that's part of what we need to figure out here, that you can go and educate yourself for free, right? You can go on and get MIT's entire coursework on YouTube right now for free. So you can spend the time educating yourself and learning, but that's different than the accreditation function. And
right.
so if you're going to take on some sort of debt that's 10 times what it is that you're going to make when you get out of school, you will absolutely never pay that back.
Yeah. I just worry that our society, with this whole like you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, and them just really truly shifting the wealth. I do think that I think there is unfortunately a lot of ideas that are playing into that without people realizing they're playing into that. And one of
Yeah.
those is, in my mind, telling people like poo-pooing education. I think that when people on the right, especially on the right, tend to say you don't need college because you can't just go and get it off YouTube or something. This is the fastest way to siphon the wealth away from the people into the upper echelons of society. Because if only the upper echelons of society can afford to be educated, can afford to become the engineers, can afford to become the lawyers and the doctors, then the vast majority of people are screwed, and that's like all the wealth goes to the top, and then
No,
truly people will have to own.
yeah, we're on the same page. I think that there's some nuance getting lost in translation here. Uh, We don't want just the wealthiest to go to school. We want it to be available to everyone. That's the whole point
Right,
of keeping that American dream. But it should be via an underwriting process that makes the college itself affordable and not create this outside, because what's happening
right.
now is we're having this transfer of wealth from the young people to the colleges because the government has disrupted the market and created a scenario where it's just any price goes and it doesn't matter. So I
Or
think we're on
maybe
the
the
same page there.
government, do you think they could be part of the solution to some of these things? Like, do you think that having free college, or state sponsored college, I mean, nothing's free. I get it. Taxpayers are subsidizing it. But do you think like taxpayer subsidized university would be maybe,
No,
a solution?
not in this country. I mean, we've never seen an area where the government has gotten involved and things have gotten better. I think that we want to get them as far out of the system as possible, and we want to help to bring the price down and not have the subsidization. Because the more that you have government and free, the more the institutions take advantage of that. And while it sounds really nice in theory, there's just too much moral hazard in the system. The people who are making the decisions don't bear any risk on the outcomes. It's too easy for them to transfer money to friends and cronies. And that's where we get the system that we have today, where you get college that is growing faster than wages or inflation or GDP, because it's just a wholesale transfer with the
Yeah.
government in the middle of it.
Out of curiosity, do you think that idea that government should be out of it and it shouldn't be free, does that go all the way to kindergarten? I mean, should kindergartners have, I mean, well, I'm just really genuinely curious. Like, at what point
Yeah, I
does
mean,
that idea stop?
so there's a sort of ideology and a reality. I think in reality, we've sort of committed to that, but I do believe in school choice. So I think that I'm fine with some level of subsidizing education, because, as you said, education makes sense for the populace. But the idea that you have to go to the school because that's where you bought your house and you're sort of stuck with that. That's, again, the issues in terms of the disparity amongst different demographic groups and whatnot really start at a much younger age. By the time you get to college, it's you may be a late bloomer, but in many cases it's late to catch up in the game. We
Right.
want to make sure that everybody has that same opportunity for education, and if you live in a poor neighborhood that has a poor school, you should have the option to go somewhere else.
I'm curious, going back to the housing, we're talking about these corporations coming in and buying houses,
Yeah.
and I would even say foreign businesses or foreigners that are coming in from other countries that are buying houses. not those that live here that immigrate, but just really are
Sure.
truly looking for investment. Do you think this is I do think the government maybe should actually step in and say you're not allowed. Like we should have, and Ron DeSantis is doing this in Florida. Interestingly, he's putting in some citizenship parameters with home buying. Wanting to put in some blocks on certain foreigners. I think it should be all foreigners, not just certain ones. If you're going to go down that road. Otherwise, it's racist. I do think then it's like targeting and bigoted a bit, so it's got to
Sure.
be blanket. So, do you think that the government, maybe there is a place for government to say we've got to protect the middle class, the home buyers, and we can't allow corporations and foreigners coming in and buying up all of the homes?
So, these kinds of things, always tend to go too far, but I do think that maybe there's a restriction level that if, and obviously you have to come up with a formula that makes sense. And I have not come up with one. So we're just kind of spitballing here. But
Yeah,
that, if the housing affordability is, at X percent of income or whatever, and there's not enough supply in the market, I mean, obviously it would just be easier to get more supply in the market. But if that is the
right.
case, then for a period of time, we should be blocking, too many, a certain number of corporate investors and certainly foreign buyers. You want to have some level of at least mom and pops in there. There should be some level of rentals because not everybody, someone might move from one place to another for a period of time. You want to have a little bit of flexibility and not have a good deed go unpunished. And that's
Right.
where the challenge comes when you start with regulation because it always tends to go too far. Or we have to stop this, and they don't think of all the use cases, and then it completely disrupts the market. So there's probably a smart
Yeah.
approach, but I'd like to see that done more at the housing association level or on an individual level. I think that probably deals with it a little bit more slickly. But from a foreign standpoint, that might be a really good place to start.
Well, a lot of countries have foreign, limitations on foreigners coming. China, for example, you can't just go in there and buy a house.
Right.
Vietnam, you
And,
can't do
and
it.
Canada, I talk about Canada in the book because their affordability problem is even worse than ours. And so they've actually put a mandate in place that's no longer letting foreign investment into the country for a
Oh, really?
mandated period. And then they're going to reevaluate it.
Wow. Yeah, I know
Yeah.
Mexico, like you can buy a house down there, but you can only own it for 99 years if you're not a Mexican, and then you have to give it back to the government or something. You have to sell it or something. So, a lot of countries have these kinds of laws. I mean, it's really. I mean, what I like is that you're really bringing attention to this because this is a real problem. I mean, we might have different solutions, we might have different
Sure.
ideas on how we come to, but the fact is, we need to be talking about this. We need to be shedding light on the fact that the money is being siphoned off, that the elites have this agenda of you're going to own nothing. You're going to be renting from all these corporations, from all of these elites that are out there. And that is a giant concern that I think many more people need to be absolutely aware of. And so, great thing that you are bringing awareness to this topic, and people can, because really, if we get control back and then we can have these debates, right? Then we can say, well, how should we solve the problem?
Right.
But right now, we're up against the elites. I mean, there's no how do we even solve it? We're up against a big force that we need to have everybody aware of, and the more awareness, then we can all say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not buying into this. That's what.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, this is across the political spectrum. It's one of the interesting things about this book is a that I'm taking the conspiracy element out of it and bringing these statistics and facts behind it. But B, I've had conversations with everybody from super progressives to like ultra conservatives, and everybody's really concerned about this as they should be and wants that plan to fight back because it really is this us versus them mentality. If you think about
Yeah,
the prediction, you will own nothing. It doesn't say will own nothing. They're not including themselves in that. They're saying you'll
yeah,
own nothing. And oh, by the way, they're saying you're going to be happy. They want you to buy into it because going back to that war analogy, it's much easier if they don't have to force this upon you. If you just go along with it and go, oh, well, it's easier and better for me to just give, my house money to Wall Street and then I don't have to worry about calling the plumber. Then they win and they didn't even have to lift a finger.
ugh, yeah. I mean, it's really scary when you think about it. But the book came out yesterday. You Will Own Nothing: Your War with the New Financial World Order and How to Fight Back. And I think you do have some, great ideas on how people can fight back against the tyranny that is coming for us all, unfortunately. Carol, thank you so much for being here. Great conversation.
Yes, thanks so much for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Well, that was a great conversation with Carol Roth. Really appreciate it. I know I get heated about that, about the education debate, but that is because, I mean, look, we are dumbing down our society. This is like a big, it's a point of contention for me with a lot of people, mostly on the right, about this, because I keep hearing people say we don't need education. Now, Carol wasn't saying that by any means, but I hear this a lot where you don't need college, it costs too much money, it's riddling you in debt, and that's true. Those are really good points, but we must be an educated society or we cannot compete. I cannot stress this enough. And I'm telling you, if I were China, let's say, and I were trying to wage war against the United States, if you really believe that's happening, and if I were going to try to wage war, the first thing I would do is I'd go whisper to a bunch of people, you don't need education. You don't need education. And then go tell everybody, college, it's just making you broke. Don't get educated. That is the fastest way to defeat a country, because you just dumb them down. You will be dumb and you will be happy. I mean, that is the fastest thing. I know a lot of you will disagree with me on that. You say you don't need college, but you do. If you want nice roads, you want buildings, you need architects, you need teachers, you need doctors, you need nurses. Most jobs that are out there that make society function need education. Otherwise, we will all be, we can't all be laborers. You know, we need laborers, but we can't all be laborers. We need everything in society, and it's also really important. But just wanted to make that point. But email me your thoughts. I love hearing from you, Kim@KimIversen.com. I know many of you disagree and will say, no, you don't need it or whatever. But I do think that it is a form of warfare to dumb down society, to keep a society stupid. You can control them a lot easier that way, that is for sure. So not saying without college you're stupid. Don't misinterpret that. I'm not saying that at all. Like I said, we need all types in our society, and in order to be robust and equipped to compete in the world stage. All right, guys. Well, I want to tell you about forpatriots.com. This is a company that's dedicated to helping Americans prepare for whatever comes their way, whether it's a natural disaster, another pandemic, knock on wood, or even just supplies to get you through summers and winters. 4Patriots has the products you need. They offer a wide range of survival gear like thermal blankets, generators, and water filtration kits. They also have many choices of survival food kits that range in size from 72-hour kits to a 1-year supply of food. I definitely think every household needs to have at least 90 days supply of food for everybody in your family, because you do not know what natural disaster or global catastrophe, or you never know what's going to happen. So it is a really, really good idea. If you're worried about the summer's heat, they also have a solar generator that's going to help you endure rolling blackouts, because those always suck. They even sell a nice little portable air machine. They have home and garden and camping gear. Check it out, forpatriots.com. Use the promo code Kim at checkout for 10% off your order.